So really the key point here that we'll be trying to show is just how to optimize the websites, improve that page speed. We'll show a demo of how much improvement doing my technique here has made on a page speed score, which is super important for SEO and just general searchability of your site. And then from there, I'll show you how we went about doing that as well. So let's go ahead and dive into the demonstration here. And really quickly, I will just give a quick intro on what we're going to be looking at. So the goal, like I said earlier, we want to optimize the image assets themselves and improve the speed in which they load without sacrificing anything of the quality. With the technique that I'll be showing here today as well, it'll also prove that it's not going to be as difficult to manage the image assets themselves. And I'll show you just what I'm talking about in a second. And like I mentioned earlier, I'm Lawrence, probably should have put this one up first. But some of the companies that we work with are folks like Foundation, if you've heard about them, big on the Ethereum blockchain, Wazirix, which is a huge Indian crypto company, and Paris, which is out in Southeast Asia. So diving into this, so these are a couple of screenshots from PageSpeed that I will show here in just a sec. But the demo will show, again, like how we're lowering the weight of the images. In my test, we lowered it by about 96% and improving the page speed score from somewhere around 74 to 100. Now, quick disclaimer there is my demonstration doesn't have all types of JavaScript or other sort of traditional things you would have on your website. I'm really just going to show how effective this is on images themselves. But again, like I mentioned earlier, why this is super important is simply for the fact that you want to make sure that the users that are coming to your platform actually end up staying and that they have a good experience. Because if they don't have a good experience, folks in crypto are quick to move on and they'll forget about your site and be quick to call it, a scam or not reputable. So we want to make sure that we cover all of those cases, and I will show you how in just a sec. So we'll talk about why Imgix after I dive into the demonstrations itself. But just for a quick preview, this is the tool that we're going to be using to optimize the images themselves. So let me go ahead and reshare the actual demo. And welcome to everyone that just joined. All right, let's get into this. And for those of you that are interested, we'll look at the code in just a sec. So I'm going to go ahead and do a quick refresh here. So this is the app that we just built. As you can see, there's a collection of NFTs here, cute little ghosts, and they look quite small. And depending on what kind of screen you're looking at this through, might be a little bit bigger, but in general, you would think that images like this shouldn't cause too much issues, right? They look like pretty simple art, very typical of like a lot of the NFT kind of collections that we see these days. And what I'm going to do here is just copy this. Oh, we already got it up. So I ran a quick page speed on this earlier. And what we found is, the performance score on desktop, we'll only do desktop, by the way, since 99% of marketplaces and galleries these days are not really mobile ready. But soon enough, the industry will shift towards that. So we want to just focus on the use case that captures, 95% of the audience here. But if you're familiar with PageSpeed Insights, it gives you an idea of what to improve on your site based on Google's recommendations to, get it better SEO and things of that nature. So really quickly, properly sizing the images is the biggest culprit here. It's adding 6.3 seconds to the load speed, which, is insane. And this is not even that bad. Imagine going on to certain sites that have, no optimization going on, tons of other folks going on. The site itself can really congest the network and reduce sort of like the speed in which you experience the gallery. So just looking here, it's recommending that we can potentially save tons of space. There's also another nick here where it's saying to serve images in next-gen formats such as WebP and AVIF. And if you've never heard of these before, these are sort of image formats that have been developed more recently in the past couple of years, and they allow the image to be compressed more without sacrificing too much on the quality, while still, creating that light file size. So this is the before, and just to prove that we're seeing the same thing here on the live site, and I'll share this at the end as well for anyone that wants to take a look at it themselves. We'll take a look at the inspection tool here. And first, let's go ahead and see how heavy this entire page is. All right, so we filtered down by images. Let's scroll up and get the sizes down here. So we can see that all of these images that are in the gallery have been loaded. Some are JPEGs. This, we can ignore that, it's PNG, but all of them are JPEGs, right? Which is what we're familiar with and what we love. We love our JPEGs here in crypto land. And the file sizes are all, in the 200s to 300s and up. There are 31 requests. 30 of these were the actual NFTs themselves. And altogether, this created like a page load of 8.1 megabytes. This is pretty heavy, I would say, for images like this. We don't want that. So how do we go ahead and reduce this and get that page speed to be faster and lighter? So let's go into the after. So you can see it's still the same gallery. Some of the images have shifted around, but they're all the same still. So let's go ahead and inspect this one more time. Get the network tab, filter by images, refresh, and boom. So we have a huge difference here. A lot has changed. So first of all, we see that the file types have all shifted from JPEGs to AVIF. This solves one of the problems that we were dinged on here in terms of serving a next-gen format, serve as WebP or AVIF. And if you're curious, AVIF is even newer than WebP. So that's that. Oh, where did the inspector go? And the coolest thing really is the savings in terms of the file size itself. We still have these 31 images that have been loaded, but instead of being 8.1 megabytes, it's actually 261 kilobytes now. So that's pretty insane if you think about it. We went from 30 images being around 8 megabytes to now 30 images being the same size as one of the old images in the previous example. And let's take a look at what exactly is going on here. It's not just magic. So if we go before, so we saw that even this took a second to load. I'm going to look at what is going on with the images themselves. So if you look above where my mouse is pointed, you'll see that there's a couple of fields here. It says rendered size, file size, etc. So the rendered size is the size of the container here that the browser loaded, right? So why is the intrinsic size, the actual image itself, so high? This is because we haven't done any type of optimization whatsoever so far. So what it's actually doing is loading an image that's 1920 by 1920 into a space that really should be, around 168 by 168. This is creating a lot of unnecessary bandwidth to be used. And imagine this one image is just like that. But if you go to each and every image here as well, same thing, right? So it's not loading the correct size. Now, in the past, what you would probably do, or if you have some kind of other tool, you would have to create a ton of different versions of this image, put it into your code and have it account for every type of scenario, whether someone's on a desktop that's 30 inches, or if their browser width is, only half the screen or full screen, all of these different scenarios. And for someone that's probably not focusing on images all day, every day, you're going to want to kind of offload that hassle. And especially as you keep getting new images out or these different file types come out, you want to stay ahead of the game. So let's dive into how we used Imgix to get all of this optimization and hassle out of the way. So I'm going to expand this. Now, don't be intimidated by this block of code here. You'll be excited to know that none of this was actually done manually. It was all done automatically through one of our libraries. But as we hover over, we can see this time that, the rendered size, same container space, and this time it loaded an image that's 328 by 328. Now you might be wondering, wasn't it supposed to be 168 by 168? It's a good catch, but what's actually happening is different screens have different pixel density ratios. And so if you're on like a MacBook, those tend to be around DPR 2, 2.5, something like that. So what it means is you can add a more crisp and heavier image without losing any sort of without compromising really on the quality. So the screen can actually take in more without losing anything in terms of the pixel ratio itself. So my laptop, my monitor has a DPR of 2. So as we can see, that's why the size that's being loaded in is twice as high as the rendered container size. So this actually fits perfectly. And how are we able to do this? This is the big question now. So let's go into some of this code here. And for those of you that are not code friendly, as a background, I have no engineering background. And, something like this was actually, very human accessible by someone like me. So I'm sure for folks out there that see something like this and get super intimidated, don't worry, we'll walk through this and it should be quick to stick. So this right here is the code for our app. These are all of the images that have been put in. And if you are one of those folks that are familiar with how to build web pages, obviously you don't have to do this all one by one like that. But I just did that for simplicity's sake. And let's take a look at the image tag here. So we see classic image tag in Next.js. You have the source, which is pulling in all of these images from here and not doing much else. Now, if we look at how we're able to do all of this optimization, we have the same page. This is the after page that we're looking at with the optimized images. And we can scroll down and again, look at that same image tag, but this time we've used an Imgix library, specifically our React library, to take care of that source set generation, which was this huge block of code that we looked at earlier. This is loading in a ton of different sizes of the same image, and the browser is going to go ahead and pick what is the best size to load based on what that user is kind of like interacting with the site with. So if they have a screen that's a lot bigger, or if they're looking on mobile and it's a lot smaller, you see like the size changed a little bit, this library will automatically pick what is the best size. And all that took is, a quick import of the React library, added some size attributes here so that the browser knows what exactly to do in these different scenarios. And then another thing that we didn't really talk about, but these Imgix parameters. And this is what's really cool using a tool like this, is you're able to pretty much like modify the image and transform it without having to do any work beforehand. So like I mentioned earlier, in the past, you might have a bunch of the same image, but different sizes to load in different scenarios. With something like Imgix, you pretty much can do all of that in the URL. and with a couple of lines of code. So what we've done here is we've added a parameter that will automatically format the image. So this is where we got the AVIF or WebP sort of improvement from the page speed score. And then we added another parameter to compress. So this will compress the image, make it even lighter by taking out unnecessary metadata from the image itself and doing a couple of other cool things that will just pretty much focus on getting the image size to be lighter so that it can load faster. We have hundreds of different parameters that you can play around with. You can even do cropping. You can create an ellipse, for example, tons of interesting different things. And we can share all of that if you're interested in learning more in our documentation. But essentially, that's all that we did to really improve the page speed score from 68 up here to the after. I don't even think I showed this yet, but it went up to 100. And obviously getting 100 on like a full-fleshed site is much harder than this. But again, for a website that just has images and not much else, the fact that it even had a 68 is already kind of funny to me anyways. But then second, you know, we got all greens here, not complaining about anything. We took care of, you know, the compression and the changing of the formats with a couple of parameters and a few lines of code. So yeah, that's pretty much the general idea of the demonstration here. None of this is financial advice, but it was web performance advice. I've always wanted to say that. So happy to take any questions as we kind of wrap things up here. And I will wrap things up with why Imgix. You know, obviously I work here, so very excited to share about it. But even if you're, you know, just having like a hobby tool or creating a pet project website, something like this could be really useful and save you a ton of time when you're working with tons of different images. You'll be able to manage your images through our UI that we provide that's free to sign up for. Like I mentioned earlier, we have these different parameters that can change the image, transform it on the fly without you having to do anything in Photoshop or anything like that. It'll optimize them, change the formats for you. And then we're also a CDN. So it delivers your images anywhere in the world, lightning fast, so that you don't have to worry about anything like that. So if you're interested in getting started with Imgix or have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. We have a YouTube channel where this talk should be up there shortly after. And then of course the documentation, if you have any questions about implementation or anything like that, should be all answered here. And then sign up for a free account. We have free tiers up to 1,000 images. So go ahead and play with it. It's really simple, and we have tons of folks ready to help out if you have any questions whatsoever. So thanks for having me here and for everyone that was listening. And have a great rest of FITC. Happy to take any questions if there are any at this point.
So it looks like we got one, Lawrence. The question is, do most online platforms accept the newer file formats for images?
Yeah, totally. So in terms of platforms, it's really not about what the site itself is. It's more about like what browser the user is on. So for example, if you're using Chrome, you know, that browser allows for something like these modern file formats to come through, Safari, etc. So yeah, I hope that answers the questions, but mainly it's all about what the browser is.
Cool. And the next one that we got is, does your CDN also backstop to something like IPFS or something similar?
Great question. And that's something I actually forgot to mention during the talk as well. In terms of handling NFTs in particular, you know, you have these storage solutions like IPFS or Arweave, and those tend to be super clunky and tough to work with and slow as well. So while Imgix doesn't directly connect to IPFS, you would need to access like a gateway in order to do that. But what a lot of our customers do is they have a source created with Imgix that points to a public gateway. And then from there, all of the assets that get pulled in from IPFS sort of like get cached at the gateway level. And then from there, you can deliver the images directly from that source. So I'm not sure if that exactly answers the backstop question, but hopefully that's something in the realm there.
Awesome. Thanks for answering that. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording for now, but if we have any other questions, definitely feel free. Turn your video on, drop them in the chat, whatever you'd prefer.
And if anyone wants to see